today's Coro Fellows Program Public Affairs Information Session. My name is Paula Hayes, and I am the Program Manager for the St. Louis location. Joining me today are some alums that completed the Coro Fellows Program in St. Louis, and I would like for them to introduce themselves, beginning with Courtney. So if you could state your name, your hometown, current employment, education, or volunteer status, as well as the current city and state you are residing in.
Yeah, I am Courtney. I am class of 2009, 2010, which suddenly feels so long ago. And I am originally from South Florida. I am currently an MBA student at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth, and most recently moved from working at a startup in Johannesburg in South Africa. So that is a very different world from Hanover, New Hampshire, but you know, here we go.
Thank you. Moving on to Nedia.
Hi, yes, I am from originally from Newark, New Jersey, and just finished up field directing for the New York State Senate. I am back in New Jersey and will be starting as youth director for Make the Road, New Jersey, which is an immigrants' rights organization here in Elizabeth.
All right. Last but not least, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks. So my name's Nathan Reynolds. Graduated from the St. Louis program last year, so class of 2015. I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, where I currently am now. And my most recent position was working on the finance team for Chris Koster's campaign for governor in Missouri. So that's it.
All right. And I appreciate you all joining me today concerning talking about the Coro Fellows and your experience. So jumping into the agenda, we'll begin by talking about the Fellows Program and various components and continue on with what life after the program looks like. We will conclude with details about the application process, and then we will have a question and answer period with questions that the viewers are asking via Twitter using the hashtag Coro StL info. All right, so let's jump right in. Our program uses the city as a classroom to train the next generation of change makers. It's a full-time 9-month immersion into multiple sectors: public, private, nonprofit, labor, and campaign. And the Coro Fellows Program exposes those participants to various industries and job settings, giving them one-on-one access to business and community leaders, addressing a range of civic issues, and it provides an unparalleled relationship building opportunity in some of the nation's most dynamic cities. So each year, 60 fellows are selected from around the country to participate in the Coro Fellows Program at one of the Coro centers, whether it's in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York. And currently, Coro is accepting applications for the 2017-2018 class that will begin in September of 2017. So there are a number of different components to the Coro Fellows Program, one of which are field placements. And so as the alums will tell you, that is the cornerstone of the Coro Fellows Program. So each fellow works in a series of individually tailored field placements. There are 3 to 5 week placements within a business, a labor organization, a nonprofit agency, a government agency, and a political election campaign. Elected officials, staffers, department heads, executive directors, and CEOs provide a vantage point for fellows to assess how organizations accomplish their goals in the social, political, and economic fabric of the city. So I want to throw out there a question to the alums. Tell us about a project that you accomplished during one of your placements.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys can hear me. I unmuted it, but one of the placements I did was at Express Scripts, and I, previous to that, had been with the General Contractors Association of Missouri and had learned about this idea of supplier diversity where minority and women-owned businesses are assigned like on a point system and can receive federal and state bids that sort of support like minority or women-owned businesses. And at Express Scripts, they in the procurement department were trying to figure out ways to support local business and generate business from these two groups specifically. So I myself and another Coro designed a heat map of the diversity requirements across the continental United States, which actually had not been done yet, or not that we could find. So that involved literally calling every state and finding out what the requirements were, if any. And then thinking about what that looked like for Express Scripts, which turned out to be a pipeline program for pharmacy students at HBCUs or colleges that had a notable experiences with supporting minority students and getting them into the managed care industry. So that was really interesting. And it was very cross-sector because we talked to folks who worked in corporate responsibility, people worked in procurement and accounting and marketing. So it was really interesting.
Cool. Anybody want to jump in and tell us about their placement?
I'm happy to offer another example. I think, so there were placements that I was really excited about because they were very up my alley, but I think I learned the most from placements that were really different from any of my experience because the learning at Coro is really unique from anything else I've ever done, where it's much more of a come from of how do I solve this instead of needing a certain content knowledge. So two very different placements for me that probably won't continue in my career, but was really, really valuable, and I think fantastic experience, both in terms of just kind of project management and learning opportunities, and a very different culture and operating in that. Is I was at the Plumber and Pipe Fitters Union, Local 562, and the Building and Construction Trades Councils for my union placement, and we did a strategy and marketing plan for them, which was really interesting about, there was some really great work that the unions were doing, but obviously, not surprisingly, in a lot of ways, unions have a really, really pretty critical reputation in a lot of capacities. So having these really difficult conversations with 1,000 union members of this might be your intention, but this is the perception, and how do we make sure that some of the really good work that you are doing is highlighted, as well as how do you grapple with some of these things that are the sense of this is what unions are, and not necessarily who you are currently and what you want to become was super interesting. And then just a very full circle quick Coro experience. I was also at the St. Louis Taxi Cab Commission, another place I probably don't frequent, but they're responsible for licensing all of the taxi cabs in the region. And I mean, right with the advent of Uber, there are lots of other things, but I redesigned and rewrote their entire taxi licensing application, which they still use on a daily basis. And so I was just reaching out to the operators of 20 big cities and how they license taxis. And that was the intersection of business interests and labor concerns, and how do you have something that's both usable for small business, but also really keeps consumers safe. And that was just super interesting. And when I finally updated my LinkedIn that I was in business school, the head of the Taxi Cab Commission just reached out and was like, we still use your work every day. And I know that it's just a matter of time until I get one of these alerts on LinkedIn of you being a CEO and doing really cool things. So it's just a very cool, St. Louis is a fascinating city, and the placement experience is really powerful. And the type of learning you get from the diversity of placements and experiences, I think is really unmatched, and something I understood in theory going in, but really learned to appreciate and practice in reality, just going through it.
Yeah, and kind of piggybacking off that, if I could, the whole idea of throwing you into an unfamiliar situation makes me think a lot about a placement I had at a tech startup called Bandura. It's a cybersecurity group. And so going into it, I had no background in really any of that, but was still tasked with creating a product placement and positioning paper for one of their new products. And so I had to go in and learn kind of the 101 of marketing and what it meant to make a product positioning paper and all that, while at the same time learning almost an entirely new language around cybersecurity and all that. And Coro really set me up to go in with kind of a clean slate and ask the right questions and know who to speak to, in a way that helped me not only learn about everything I needed to regarding the product, but also provide a product to them at the end that was something that they could use. So it was a learning experience, but it also, set me up in a way that I could deliver something that they could use in the future too.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. So I want to move into another one of the components of the Coro Fellows Program, and that is actually the individual and group projects. And so fellows work together to address critical issues in society, such as education, health, economic, and neighborhood development that often engages stakeholders from multiple sectors. These projects give fellows an opportunity to utilize the skills that they have developed to overcome real-world obstacles and develop recommendations for their host organizations. Within these projects, they stress the importance of effective communication, teamwork, and individual responsibility within a group. Each fellow engages also in an additional individual project. And these projects, which are also called individual or independent placements, allow fellows to design, market, secure funding for, and implement a project that will benefit a host organization of their choice. So alums, what did you all do for your group project, or tell us about one of your individual placements?
All right, well, I'll start with the group placement just because for me that I think stuck out almost more than anything. It was far and away my favorite project. Also, definitely the most challenging that I had. I was placed with 3 other fellows at a foundation in St. Louis, and we were tasked with writing a white paper rather on early education, early childhood education in the region. So it was an incredibly huge project. It dealt with a million different stakeholders, each of which, had no less than, a decade, 15 years of experience within this subject area of expertise. So we had to consult them and kind of find, first of all, kind of what the current state of early childhood education was in the region, and then, what we could do moving forward. There was a recent ballot initiative in November, and what we were doing was kind of doing a little front work and saying, well, if that passes and there's this new influx of money for early childhood education, what could we do? Or where can we allocate the money that's going to make the most sense? And so worked incredibly hard, in the course of a month, conducted something like 50 interviews with different stakeholders, and ended up producing a paper that was, used by everyone from educators to foundation leaders to individuals in the mayor's office too. So that was an incredible project, super challenging. And what was also rewarding on top of the actual subject itself was working with my fellow fellows. We had, worked in the seminar space and were familiar with each other, but to be put on a project like this is almost a separate task in and of itself, because you really need to know, you have to learn what people's strengths are, what people's weaknesses are, when to step up, when to move back, and kind of find your own dynamics within that group space. So really incredible experience, and definitely one of the highlights of my time.
Either one of the other ladies who want to share one of your individual group or individual projects?
I can share mine. So my final individual project where you source, get it funded, all of that fun stuff, was actually a group project. So our trainer definitely thought it was not going to happen, and everyone was trying to walk us off of it. Like, it's in the middle of a recession and everyone's getting away from funding everything, and suddenly we want 3 fellows funded on this really ambitious project. But we got 2 foundations to fund us and did the due diligence on a big Promise Neighborhood initiative, and did a pretty huge project that involved like 60 stakeholders. and doing all of the research based on place-based services, as well as models of effective collaboration, how this stuff actually works, and more importantly, in some ways, how it falls apart. And so creating all sorts of organizational structure, one part research, one part stakeholder engagement. It was just really multifaceted, and ended up coming up with this basically like 60-page report, but more importantly, the first real honest working group conversation that they had. And I think the learning for that was we came in really excited about how we're going to transform St. Louis, you know, in a month kind of thing, and that this stuff is super simple if you just kind of Coro it and think and work really hard. And that was really great, but the foundations ended up not investing, which I think is an equally important lesson that I've definitely learned quickly in business school is like the numbers and the mechanics actually have to work with how the funding is. And that's a hard thing to do, is to figure out, you know, when to walk away. And that was really valuable, because I think there is this idea that we often get into of like, it seems like a really good intention, or you have a high sunk cost of spending a lot of time on something. And sometimes the right thing to do is to do your due diligence and then be like, hey, listen, this is really important. If someone else wants to drive this forward, but without these conditions, we're not going to make this investment, because it just doesn't seem super sound. And so it was really great learning. It was really important, I think, for the foundations, because there was a lot of buzz around this stuff at the time, and it was just a kind of perfect capstone in really complicated civically embedded problems that have cross sections of business, you know, philanthropy, government, and all of these many players, and how you get those things to work or not, and how to just have a really critical eye on that.
Thank you for sharing. So if Nedia does not want to join, or you can nod if you do, I can move right on into group interviews. So it looks like, yes, I should move on into group interviews, and that's fine. All right. So another component of the Coro Fellows Program are those group interviews. And so fellows have a chance to interview many influential leaders, from members of Congress to CEOs. Let me jump out of that. Y'all don't want to see that. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies or grassroots community members. Fellows are given this rare opportunity to explore the motivations, methods, and logic of skillful leadership. Now, we've done a number of group interviews over the course of the time I have been managing the program, so I would love to hear from my alums who were some of the individuals that your cohort interviewed, and even share with us who might have been your favorite interview.
So we interviewed Pete Rouse in the Roosevelt Room at the White House, and it's pretty hard to top that. Like, and I'm an education dork. We had interviewed Arnie Duncan earlier in the week, so that was incredible. We had an amazing policy week, which is a kind of culminating experience that we did in DC, and we actually stayed for 2 weeks. So I got to spend like we did these shadow days of people we really respected. So I got to be at like Children's Defense Fund, shadowing Marian Wright Edelman and the COO of Children's Defense Fund, and like on these calls with the board and stuff. So DC was incredible for me. But one of the things I would emphasize actually about the group interviews is there's a very Coro skill of asking an effective question. And it's something that you really get through the interview experience, and that I really appreciate. And I think as you learn that skill set and you see your fellows asking these effective questions, and you see the impact and power that you have when you craft an effective question, and you see how the interviewers respond, it's really empowering and fascinating. And I constantly, when I was interviewing, I was at KIPP for 4 years, and when I was interviewing people from my team and at KIPP, I would think mostly about the questions they would ask at the end of the interview. And even in class now, like I turn when someone asks a really effective question, because it just changes the whole balance of the class. And so, but as far as just kind of ultimate experiences, Pete Rouse, you know, in the Roosevelt Room at the White House was pretty epic. That was,
I saw pictures from that particular week that you all had in DC, and actually, yeah, I have the picture of Arnie Duncan on my desk. So that's cool. Anyway, I'm gonna pick on you, Nedia. Tell us about one of your favorite interviews or someone that you all interviewed during your course of the program.
Yeah, so probably one of my favorite interviews was with Michael Davis. He is the former Assistant Secretary of Labor. Yeah, I got that right. And I think what was most impactful for me is like when he decided to change careers, like for a second and for a third time, even like he was using his Coro skills like through and through, and it seemed to have really helped him. Um, More than that, we talked. We're probably one of the first interviews. You know, while I enjoyed my experience in St. Louis, and there's an incredible amount of access, you know, there's a feeling of homesickness you sometimes get. And he talked about one of the projects that he had started up in New Jersey, and it really changed things in the city. And I remember it doing so good as well. So he played a big part of that. Was really exciting. But really, to piggyback off what Courtney was saying earlier, like the question asking was huge for me. Thinking about, you know, when you're going into an informational interview, what is it that you're trying to get, or more than that, how are you trying to present yourself? And then seeing not only how you, but how your group is growing into more than a group and into a team. And seeing how people are following your question with another question. You know, it created like a team bond that like I don't think a direct one-on-one contact could have. You know, it was something that came across by somebody respecting my question with a great follow-up question.
Thank you. I see Leore has joined us on the phone call, so I want to give her an opportunity to introduce herself to the group that's watching today. And so the question that I asked the other alums earlier was, share with us your name, your hometown, current employment, education, or volunteer status, as well as the current city and state that you are residing in.
Sure. I'm sorry. There was some technical difficulties that I was having and I couldn't figure it out, but I kept trying, so apparently it worked. So I'm glad to hear that. My name is Leore Ben-Shoren. I graduated from the Coro program in 2015. I am from Cupertino, California. I currently reside in Boston, Massachusetts, and my current position is I am a research assistant at the Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, which is a think tank located within the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. Yeah, that's a little bit about myself.
We appreciate you sharing that with us. So we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the components of the Coro Fellows program. We had hit field placements. We also talked about individual and group projects. And right now we were talking about group interviews, and I was gonna allow Nathan the opportunity to share with us who was one of his favorite interviews, as well as some other people that his cohort interviewed. So I'll give him that opportunity now, and then we can revisit your answer to that question as well. So Nate?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually funny you put that picture up because that was the interview that I was going to mention. That was our cohort talking to St. Louis City Treasurer Tashara Jones. And we had, you know, more interviews than I could even count, and everyone more extraordinary than the next. But this one really stood out to me because I think what Coro, among other things, pushes you to do is really to check your own assumptions and really try to go into every experience and interview with a blank slate. And I know, at least for me personally, going into the city treasurer's office, I think I had some definitely unfounded assumptions about what that office did, or you know, how they operated in a day-to-day capacity. And what was interesting was hearing how Treasurer Jones took an office like the city treasury and what had been kind of a static office, and really changed it and modernized it, and has been doing incredible things. And so we really dug into that, and were able to, you know, dig into how she came about her current position, as well as, you know, how she went about changing an office in the city, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. Sometimes there's a little hesitation to change and modernize, and so that was really great to hear. Definitely one of my favorite things.
Yes, and she's actually running for mayor. I believe she just submitted her name for that. So it'd be cool to see how that pans out. So Leore, I want to give you an opportunity to jump in and share with us one of your favorite interviews from your cohort season.
Favorite interview came from our trip to DC, which we took in I think it was, so one of the most interesting interviews was that we got to interview two of the presidential speechwriters. And so that entailed going to it's called the Executive Office Building. It's like right to the right of the White House. And we got to sit in there and meet two of the people that basically decide on the words that come out of Obama's mouth. And so hearing them talk about their favorite speeches and how they come up with the speeches and the themes and how they've developed a really, really strong relationship with Obama himself was really interesting. Since I do foreign policy, my head is always in sort of DC national security. And so hearing them talk about some of those speeches was really incredible for me.
DC seems to have really been a eye-opening place for the fellows experience. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about issue week a little bit later. So I want to transition into another important part of the program, which are seminars. And I would love to hear your thoughts on those. But want to talk about what that is. And it provides a forum for fellows to come together to debrief and reflect on and apply their learning from their various field placements. In addition, the Fellows Trainer enhances the Coro experience by introducing a variety of communication, organization, and leadership tools. So when we talk about that experiential education component, this is the tools that you get concerning that. One thing I want to say that is important is Coro trainers do not teach. Rather, they work to challenge and support fellows during their unique Coro experience. And Nathan mentioned it earlier, talking about challenging assumptions. And so that's just one of the things that we kind of uncover in the course of seminars. So alums, definitely want you to talk about that seminar experience. So what did you do and how did it impact you?
I think seminar is probably still the piece of Coro that is the most difficult to articulate. It doesn't really make sense until you're in it. I also had the benefit of training, the benefit and the challenge of training with like one of the Coro trainers with Gertie, and she really, really pushed me. I was used to doing really well in school and you know, kind of graduating top of the class and all of those things. And she pulled me aside after seminar one day and told me basically that I was being selfish, which I was. Like, I like to raise my hand or kind of talk up in class when I felt like I knew a really brilliant response that would move the conversation forward. And her point was that I wasn't taking the most out of the training, that this wasn't school and there wasn't a right answer. And I wasn't fully engaging in the process and I wasn't fully engaging. While I was benefiting from the other fellows' thought process, I wasn't fully engaging in that and allowing them to benefit from mine, which was weird to hear, having used to like doing well. But it was really, really important. And I think it was a really important shift in kind of my training and development there. Because Coro is as much as you put in as you get out. But I think training is a very difficult thing when you're coming from an academic environment and it feels like, oh, I submit this and then I've done it. But it's really a paradigm shift and it's really a process of thinking and approaching problems, which was incredibly helpful and is something I've taken to every job and definitely in my MBA. And I just actually met with an alum who's applying to Tech this year. And it was a really interesting conversation as he was like, how similar is business school to Coro? And I was like, nothing is similar to Coro and you just don't learn at that same clip. The best way I can explain it, I think, is in one of my first sessions in my first week of seminar. If you remember the experience, like vaguely of being a kid and when your world, the way you perceive the world is kind of emerging. and your mind feels like it's physically growing, and it kind of hurts almost as if you were working out at the gym because you didn't know what you didn't even understand was out there. And you just start uncovering that. And it's like when you first start learning that the sky isn't blue because someone's painted it, but that there's actual like science and things behind that. And it's just as a little kid, it's not something most of us experience, I think, in our formal education very often, if at all, honestly, after that. So the process of thinking about things critically and really thoughtfully is something I really miss, and I think is still the most difficult thing to articulate about Coro. But I definitely, my closest friends are still from Coro, and if I was starting a company, they would be the first people I hire because they just get it. Like, they have a certain sense of training and a fundamental like wherewithal and come from that I would be confident that they could just do anything that kind of came at us. And that is very much what I got from seminars and that training.
Looks like, do I have another one of you all that want to jump in and share about your Coro Fellow seminar experience?
It just cut out. Did you say my name? Sorry.
Well, we can pick on you, Leore. You can share your seminar experience.
I heard it like is cutting in and out. So please, whoever was supposed to speak, please go for it.
We give you the floor.
Me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, it's cutting in and out, so it's hard for me to, I'm sorry if I cut someone else off. That was not my intention at all. Seminar was definitely life-changing for me. I think the thing that was most valuable was, and I don't know if people already talked about this before, but the concept of that you don't know what you don't know. And just that idea takes you in a million different places. But for me, it was most important in the feedback sessions that we had, which was when we would all go around one by one, do like little one-on-one conferences, and tell each other what we thought we needed to improve on and what we were doing well. And having that really, really frank conversation with a bunch of your friends allows you to see parts of yourself that you didn't know were there, or to reflect on the parts of yourself that are, you know, really valuable. And I think that boosts your self-confidence, and it also reminds you that we all have a lot of learning to do. And to me, that was the most valuable part of Coro, was we have a lot of learning to do, and the learning never stops. And the striving for personal growth will always be there for me because of this experience.
Thank you. A huge part of that whole seminar experience is the group process. And so the cool thing about this is that Coro places a high priority on bringing together people who differ in ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, educational and work experience, political views, sexual orientation, geography, and age. As you have already heard, the alums that's just on this call are from all over this United States. But in this seminar space, this unique setting, fellows learn how to operate as a self-governing group by challenging each other's assumptions, taking responsibility for increasing each other's effectiveness as leaders, building consensus, and providing each other with continuous feedback, evaluation, and encouragement. So I would love to hear from the alums about the significance, the value, and the challenges of working as a group during your fellow experience. And I know there are some.
So I don't want to dominate the conversation at all, but if no one else has anything right away, it was really, really hard. Working with that many other really smart type A people who know exactly the right way to do something is really challenging because everyone is convinced that they have the perfect approach. And it's difficult because you're used to doing things often. So group work to me was very much just like I did the work, either because other people, it just wasn't that important to when you're randomly assigned in a group, They just didn't care enough, or I felt like it wasn't going to get done. And so kind of wait until the night before and you're like, hey, everyone was supposed to send me that section of the project, and I guess I'll build the entire PowerPoint deck because I just don't have it. That is the opposite of Coro, and it's very feedback driven, and people have very different perspectives on how to move forward. And so you're really hashing that out, and it's a really iterative process of hashing that out. So one of my closest friends from Coro is still in St. Louis, and she's a rock star, and she does really cool work kind of in the innovation and diversity space in St. Louis. But we are very different personalities. We're very strong personalities, but very different personalities, and we kind of immediately did not like each other. And she's now one of my closest friends, and I literally just got an email from her because two of them was asking if I wanted to transfer business schools because they're going to be like on a beach this weekend, and would I rather go to business school on a beach? The answer in the middle of winter is yes. But she is just such a different personality from me, and we just misread each other entirely. And we were on our group project together, and even though we had gotten along a lot better, I was still very worried about how we were going to butt heads over the course of this project, and it went flawlessly. Because we called each other out on things, we did feedback for each other, which was really grounded in a mutual respect and appreciation, and we were able to leverage two very different skill sets and approaches to work to be incredibly effective. And she is one of the first calls I make anytime I'm going through something really difficult. But in any other kind of work or school setting, you don't get past that superficial understanding of each other. And you have to in Coro because you spend an inordinate amount of time together.
Nedia, share with us about your group experience.
Yeah, so again, to add on to what Courtney was saying, if anyone who's joining us today on the webinar has ever done campaign work, it is a 24/7 gig, and that's exactly what Coro is. It is a time where I think when you're heading into the first couple of months, you need to reach out to your friends and your family and say, I'm going to be away for a little bit because this takes up a lot of my time. And so in that way, you find, for me at least, you find family in the 11, 14 other people that you're working with. And so like that's kind of the more impetus to when you're fighting and being honest and giving each other feedback, thinking about ways to make it constructive, to make it purpose driven is like an immediate need because these are the people that you spend the most amount of time with, which was really exciting and really stressful. But it also, gave you an idea of like what would be an ideal team and how can you take it to your next workplace, and how can you manage people who don't seem to really mesh with the idea that you have of the perfect team player. So it was incredibly difficult, and our group process changed a number of times as we headed into our DC or when we did small group projects, and independent placements, independent or with groups, changed how the dynamic was in seminar. And I think, as Courtney was saying, because we were all equally invested when we were at seminar together, we try to figure out what do these placements mean for our group process now. So that was really interesting and really fun, scary, but very exciting.
Yeah, if I could just jump on that really quick too. I think a little bit earlier, Courtney said it best, that Coro is kind of unlike anything else in any other setting. And so even working in a group space is completely different. Nedia talked about how it's 24/7, and the benefit of that in a Coro space is that, you're learning, you're hearing these different perspectives, and you also get time to figure out the how come. So something, Nedia and I were in the same cohort, and something that we took upon ourselves was to interview one another. So in addition to all these incredible stakeholders, we took time to sit down and get to know each other. So after interviewing Nedia and learning about her time in college and high school and her family and all that great stuff, then moving forward in the group space or making decisions, not only was it then easier to hear different perspectives, but also what that is based in, where they're where they were coming from and what type of life experiences and things like that really informed their decision-making process. So I think really the greatest benefit in the amount of time you spend together is getting that deeper understanding of where people are coming from and kind of where they build their own processes and where they build their decision-making and what that's really rooted in. So that was, I think, one of the greatest benefits of working in a group.
If Leore doesn't want to jump in, I want to move right into focus weeks. And you actually, I think 3 of the 4 have talked about the National Affairs Week, but want to talk a little bit more about some of the other issue weeks that happen throughout the course of the program. So focus weeks are in-depth exploration weeks that look at usually local civic issues through interviews and other experiential activity. It's a chance to really get out into the city or community that you're in with your other fellows. So some of the intensive explorations of focus topics we've covered over the years, I've seen state government, philanthropy, agriculture, media, national affairs. So I want to talk a little bit about, aside from National Affairs Week, what were some of your other focus weeks that you did during the course of your program? Leore, you start us off?
Sure. So one of the most memorable weeks for me was Agriculture Week. Coming from California, I've never really, I mean, there's some agriculture in the Central Coast, in the inland areas, but I've never really been around farms or really thought about how we get our food or any of those things. And so for me, going on a bus and driving through Missouri and getting to meet with a dairy farmer, we met some people who were doing conversion of like soybeans into ethanol. We went to a hog processing plant, which is where they butcher hogs, and other types of activities like that was really eye-opening. It's really easy to talk about policy in a room, like City Hall, but to go and talk to actual farmers and to hear about the issues that they're dealing with and to hear about things that are on their mind is a really incredible experience. And the reason it's important for us, people who want to go into policy, is because it reminds us how important it is to go talk to people in the grassroots to actually hear how our policies are affecting them so that we can create more effective policy. And I think that's the reason that Coro is to every single person for different reasons, is because regardless of what you're doing, whether it's agriculture or national issues like I'm working on, there's a lot they draw through all different subjects, and this is one of them, I think, getting to really understand the grassroots and the grass tops.
Now, I know last year's group did Media Week, which I heard great things about. So one of my alums from last year want to share a little bit more about their experience.
Sure. I'll start and let Nedia take over. So Media Week was an in-depth look at obviously media in the region, and so it was a really it was a good look at traditional and newer forms of media, and it really kind of flipped, I think, a lot of our own thinking about how the media portrays different issues and how that's incorporated into public affairs and how much that really shapes different dialogues across sectors. And we had an incredible amount of really unique experiences. I, for one, had the opportunity to sit in on a morning talk show, morning conservative talk show in St. Louis. And it was just kind of one-on-one time. And I got to, hear about, the technical aspect of, what it takes to put on a show like that, but also, the bigger issues about, what are people talking about? How does that play into, the national political dialogue and what things are going on within St. Louis? And that was an incredible experience. And it was really interesting to have that really in-depth look at something that I think we kind of take advantage of a lot. I think media is one of the things that's just so present in our daily lives that we don't really necessarily think about it or aren't as critical of it as we'd like to be. So that was an incredible time for sure.
So I'll add. So there was myself and a few other choros got to go to StL NPR station in St. Louis Public Radio, and that was really exciting. We got to meet with some folks who were talking about, how to not get, I guess, tokenized after Ferguson, because they had done such good coverage of, what had happened after, and what they could do to, not necessarily stay current, but to not get forgotten in the masses or forgotten by other, outshined by other stations. So that was really interesting, and something I had never thought about before. I'd never actually been much of a listener of NPR, and shared a subscription with a friend while I was in school.
And as a reminder to those that are actually watching this via YouTube Live, you can send us your questions via Twitter using the hashtag Coro StL info, and we will ask the alums that towards the end of this call. So if Court doesn't have anything to share about that she's pressing to share on Focus Week, I want to go on and move on to a question I get a lot right now with recruitment, as far as what does Coro look for in a fellow alum, or in a fellow before you become an alum? So what we're generally looking for are bright, self-initiating individuals that are committed to ethical and effective leadership. You must have a bachelor's degree for this program. We'd like for you to show evidence of leadership experience, or at least show leadership potential. Have the ability to work within a diverse group. You've heard from the alums how important that is. Have a commitment to public service. Definitely need to be flexible and have intellectual curiosity. As we mentioned earlier, they come from all academic disciplines, careers, ethnic and social economic backgrounds. They may be right out of school, and we've even had some that have done it in recent cohorts that were mid-career professionals. Life after Coro, which is very important. The alums have already shared with you what they're doing currently, but we want to talk a little bit more about how the Coro network of alums and partners have benefited them. So if they would share their experiences post-Coro, I would love to hear about that.
So I'm still very close with my class, and I would say that's kind of my most important network, both like personally and professionally. Anytime I have a crazy idea of something I might want to start or might want to do, they're the first people I call. We're all at each other's weddings and stuff, and it's just very much a tight-knit community. And I really value that. They're incredible, and they're just a really valuable, diverse community again still. And so that's awesome. And then there are a couple other folks that I think have been really valuable. I was very close with a program officer from the Gates Foundation, who is a Coro San Francisco alum who's now at the Broad Center. So she's really steeped in the education world. We just constantly kept in touch. And then there'd be these funny like Coro Little World interactions where she was, DC's a small town in a lot of ways. She was at lunch one day with another Coro, and Dianne Feinstein, who's, a very famous alum, was having lunch with Hillary Clinton. And she just like saw her in line at the bathroom and said, Senator Feinstein, I just want to let you know I'm a Coro alum, really respect you and whatnot. And she was like, oh, come meet Hillary, which, is a weird world kind of thing. And Tim Kaine is also an alum, so lots of representation right now. But she was just a great resource, and anytime I would be thinking about both things that I was doing at KIP and moves that we were thinking about making and funding spaces, because I worked really closely in kind of our college access world, which is something Dates is pretty steeped in. She was a great resource both for me kind of on a job front, but also is just a great contact, and she gets it. Coro, like I said, can be a little difficult to articulate. People really love and respect it, but again, just in the way that like seminar can be a little difficult to articulate. So the network and people who really get it are really valuable. And then there are other things like Brian Roeder owns a winery in Virginia. So we not only had like our final fellowship retreat at his winery in Virginia, which, you know, is really, really a hard life. But there were 4 or 5 of us at DC for multiple years, and we would just go out every once in a while and have these fascinating conversations over great wine. So it's not a bad life in that way either. But again, you can just have like a depth of conversation where they very much understand what you've gone through. The way that you might be approaching a job search is really different. But it's also just really refreshing, going back to kind of people asking effective questions and really thinking about things critically and not coming at things of, this is my worldview, so I'm asking a question, but I'm really just saying what I think. And it's really a comment with a question mark at the end. I think there's just a kind of greater level of depth when you're talking to someone in the Coro network, which I really value. And I'm talking to this alum the other day who's from the New York Center, but is applying to talk. He was like, I just wanted to talk to you because I can talk to anyone about investment banking or anything else here, but being able to really talk about translating from Coro to a much more traditional academic setting, it's really helpful to have that shared frame of reference. And so I always really enjoy those conversations, and I'm happy to have them and really value having them with other alums.
Thank you.
Yeah, talking about kind of the depth of that relationship, Nedia and I finished this past year, so haven't had a tremendous amount of interaction with the alumni, but just in terms of where our relationship stands as a cohort, you know, I just came back from about 2-week trip with 2 other fellows, had a great time just hanging out. But at the same time, you know, the relationship we built, it's almost minimized, I think, by calling it a friendship, because I think they're really the only group of people where I can vacation for 2 weeks and have a great time and then turn around and say, you know, I need help with XYZ, or if you could take a look at my resume, or what do you think about this, and immediately switch and have a really critical and intentional conversation about really whatever you need. And that type of space took a long time to establish, a lot of really late nights for sure. But I think what we built as a cohort is unmatched. And I feel 100% confident in calling up any one of the 15 other fellows from my cohort and asking them for feedback, for advice, or to just crack some jokes. And I know that because I would do exactly the same thing for any one of them. So it's a special relationship and something that I know is going to continue to grow and help us all in the future.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so when I moved back east, I got connected with Coro New York, and they have welcomed me with open arms. Have invited me to all of their events, and again, there's just a shared language that we have that doesn't really just I guess like your Coro muggle wouldn't understand. So it's exciting how much it opens doors and opens conversations with Coros elsewhere, that are not in your year.
I appreciate you bringing the New York Center up, because this is a national program, and so alums are everywhere. And it looks like, Leore, you were about to jump in and say something, so I want to give you that opportunity.
Yeah, just bringing it back to how it helps post-Coro, I want to focus on the jobs because that's a key factor here. Coro Fellowship was another fellowship called the Scoville Fellowship, which is a nuclear-focused fellowship in DC. And during my fellowship or during my fellowship interview, I remember someone said, you know, I've heard about Coro before. Can you tell us about your experience? And I think it immediately set me apart from the other applicants. And I think it might have played a role in why they chose me for the fellowship. And then when I came to interview here at the Belfer Center, one of the guys, now my coworker, told me that his sister was a Coro Fellow in Los Angeles and asked me to talk about that. And so it keeps coming up in my interview processes, and it allows me an opportunity to speak about the breadth of my experiences and the skills that I think I have and how they relate to Coro. And so for me, Coro has been really a stepping stone for the rest of where my career has gone so far, and I have no doubt that it will continue to have the same impact going forward. A lot of people know what Coro is, and so it's a good conversation starter at interviews, and it really does set you apart from other applicants in the applicant pool.
Thank you. That was very valuable to add to the conversation. Another thing that I definitely want to bring up that most people tend to overlook about the Coro network is that we have university partnerships nationally that actually has scholarship money set aside for those Coro alums that are looking to further their education. Some of the universities include Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, Wash U here in St. Louis, Mills College in Oakland, City University of New York. So this is something else that Coro Fellow alums have to look forward to post-Coro. So just wanted to make sure I mentioned that as well. So I know we're coming up to the top of the hour. I do want to go over how to apply, because many of the people that are watching today are interested in applying for this program. So the deadline to apply is Wednesday, January 18th, 2017. It is already upon us December, so that is right around the corner. As far as the application is concerned, it is online, and so you would apply at www.corofellowship/apply-today. Within that application, there are 3 essays to fill out. With the exception of if you're interested in New York, they ask for a 4th essay, and they want to hear from applicants who are interested in staying in New York long term, and they ask about those aspirations. Additionally, you would have to submit academic transcripts, 2 letters of recommendation, as well as your resume. So keep your eye out for that. One change that we do have with this year's application, and this is very important, in that application, you must state the center that you are interested in. And so you will see a drop down asking you that. And then you'll also, with the exception of New York, see another drop down once you choose your first choice, asking you if you're interested in any of the other 3 remaining centers. And so I would definitely want to bring some attention to that. So before we get off this call, I want to open it up for questions. So I want to see what things came in as far as that is concerned. So let me jump over here real quick. All right. So question, what does Coro stand for? Which is interesting. And I see a couple of laughs on the call as far as that. So I do want to clarify, Coro is not an acronym for anything in particular. However, the organization founders just use this to describe the unique mission and methods that are used by the Coro locations. So when they came up with their vision for the program of educational discovery on preparing citizen leaders, it was a totally new concept. Thus, they came up with a new word, which ended up being Coro. So that was one of those questions that I did have come in. Let's see, any other questions that came in via, looks like the rest of them are questions that we've answered during the course of the call. So what I do want to do is thank the fellows for joining us on this. This has been a very, very interesting yet chock full of information conversation. So I want to thank again Courtney for joining us, Leore for joining us, Nathan for joining us, as well as, I say Nedia. Is it Nedia? I heard Nathan say something else. Am I mispronouncing that? Well, my apologies, but again, in all seriousness, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I look forward to those applications being submitted by January 18th, and feel free to reach out to us here in St. Louis at fellows@focus-stl.org if you have any questions that were not answered on this call. So thanks again. You all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.